Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. This podcast is brought to you by the Numinous School, an online intuition development course for people who want their self-awareness to serve a greater good. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola, and this week my guest is the lovely, talented, sexy Rosie Bitts. She's a burlesque performer, a singer, and an educator, and I caught up with her over Skype. She was at home in Victoria, BC. So, Rosie, tell me about the first burlesque performance you remember seeing. Like, what was your first impression?
Oh, wow. I think the first live burlesque performance I ever saw, I actually did pick up for. So that means I was the stage kitten who was picking up the clothes of the girls who were performing. And it was Bettina May, who now lives in New York City, and another lady, and it was in Victoria, Lucky Bar. And I was just stunned and riveted and felt completely like akin to what was happening. I was like, this is what I am meant to do.
Wow. So it was like an instant attraction for you.
Absolutely. I'd been stalking burlesque performers. This is about 10 years ago. So it's kind of pre lots of stuff being on the internet. And I'd been like looking at books and ordering books from different libraries and trying to find out as much as I could about burlesque. And then very by chance, I met Bettina May, like just on a fluke, and found out she was a burlesque performer. So by the time I got to a show, I was already hooked in. And when I saw it for real, I was just like, yes, this is absolutely where I should be. This is what I should be doing.
Wow. So how did you learn burlesque after that?
Trial and error. There was a bunch of us, which became the Cheesecake Burlesque Review, and they're still a troupe that are strong and fantastic, although I left them a long time ago. And we were just all in the same place as women, and we just jumped in, and it was I don't know if I would have done it if it wasn't for that troupe, if it wasn't for that group of women, because nobody else was doing it here. There was nobody really that close by or accessible. Like I said, it was kind of, internet was around, but not the way we use it these days. And being with a group of women just made it so much easier to jump in and to learn things as you go. So like we literally were learning on the stage as we were performing for people and figuring things out, like Velcro is not our friend, stuff like that.
Were you dancers?
Some people were dancers. Some people had no stage experience whatsoever, had never been on the stage. I have a theater background, and I've got some dance. Like I did some dance as a kid. It was a real mishmash. There was a lot of women who were highly academic.
Really?
Yeah. And who just really wanted a creative outlet, a sexy creative outlet, so they could connect with their inner diva and connect with their sexuality, because they were going to work in these like high-powered, very men's environments.
Okay, so this is interesting because I sometimes wonder like what you would say to people who argue that burlesque isn't in fact empowering to women because we live in patriarchy. So like really, you can't say that it's an empowered choice for a woman when you live in a patriarchy. It's just kind of an internalized objectification of women. Like that, and that's getting pretty academic, but it's definitely an argument I've heard. Whereas the burlesque community is so much about women's empowerment, and the message often seems to be about, this is a woman's choice and this is about reclaiming sexuality. How do you address that, and how did those women, I know you can't speak for them, but I'm just curious what your conversations about that might have been like.
You know what? Okay, back at that time with the Cheesecakes, we didn't worry about it a lot, period. I worried about it personally. Not all the women in the Cheesecakes at that time associated themselves as feminists, nor do they all these days associate themselves as feminist. I do. And so for me, it was a big deal. And I really had to get clear on how that lined up with my value system as a feminist woman. And I'm asked this question all the time. And the short answer is um, a woman who has agency over her body, anytime you claim agency over your body, that is a feminist movement, right? That is an extension of the feminist movement because we really and truly still in 2015 don't actually have full control over our bodies or the choices that we're making about our bodies. For example, when my shows get shut down from liquor boards, etc. So when you, as a woman, you have agency over your body, that is right there is feminism. And, anytime, whether it's a woman who claims to be a feminist, a man, or anybody else is shutting down your choice about your body, that's deviating from the feminist movement.
What about the male gaze though? So when you get off stage and you have all these people, potentially there's, feminists, male and female in the audience supporting you, but then you get off stage and there's some guy who's like, "Hey baby, can I flick your nipple tassel?" kind of thing, like I would imagine that you get the gamut. And so what's your response to that?
We do get the gamut, but I get less of those men at a burlesque show than you do on the street, or just in a regular day-to-day interaction that I do at a burlesque show, because there is a culture that surrounds burlesque performance that is very feminist, that is very female-oriented, where the majority of our audience members are female generally. The majority of our fans are female. Because it's really about women reclaiming their sexuality. The difference as well is that the women who come on a burlesque stage are not aesthetically put together in a way that makes it easy for them to be objectified.
What do you mean by that?
You are looking at a whole woman. You are looking at a woman who is anywhere between 19 and 85.
That's true. I've seen a woman in her 80s perform an awesome performance in Vancouver. I was surprised at how sexy and charming it was.
Right?
Yeah.
And you are seeing women in like the full gamut of women. So you're seeing the tiniest, skinniest little women. You're seeing women who are augmented. You're seeing massive women. You're seeing women who have obviously had children with stretch marks and cellulite. Like, you are seeing the full gamut of women embracing themselves. And that is very different than, a situation where women are really put together to look a certain way to make it easy for men to objectify them. Like, I really believe I love strippers and I love strip clubs. I will support them up and down. But that is a different business where they hire women who look they look a certain way, and they look, each of them, fairly similar to one another, and it makes it easy to objectify them. It makes it easy to see them as body parts as opposed to whole people.
That's true. And I found that very heartwarming, actually, about going to a few different burlesque festivals that I've attended over the years, and the boylesque, when men are up there. I mean, I just found that I was experiencing things I'd never experienced before, like a really fulsome woman dancing and, enjoying her jiggly bits. I just found that, like, really inspiring, and not just in the way that it's like, wow, she's really brave to do that because she's a large woman, but also just like, wow, I could do that. I could totally do that. It was like, wow, her body is a high performance machine. In fact, I could not do that move that she's doing right now. Like that, it was just a wondrous kind of performance that I just found is so lacking in our culture, that it was like very, very compelling. I wanted to see something original, and I did, just like performance after performance. And I have to say that for me, then when somebody would come out looking quite a lot like, say, a Dita Von Teese, very kind of old Hollywood and that sort of thing, I started to feel a bit like, I've seen this before. I really like the variety and the diversity. So, it's just personal preference, and, not everything is going to be to your taste, but I just love that element of surprise and originality that is something I don't think everyone expects from burlesque. So I want to ask you about the first time you performed then on your own, not in the review. Actually, no, tell me about the first time with the review.
The first time I performed with the Cheesecakes, I wouldn't do a solo number. I was too nervous. I was too shy and just really didn't have enough confidence, which anybody who knows me or fans of me will be like, what? But that's the truth. I was really nervous. I didn't own a pair of high heels. I had to buy a pair of high heels for the show because I had, I was really immersed in mothering. I just trained as a doula, so I was thinking about, potentially being a doula full time. And my whole life was around family and children. I taught parenting classes, I taught music to young children. So it was a big departure for me. And I felt two things simultaneously. I felt split open. Like I felt like literally my chest had just split right open. I felt vulnerable in a way that I had not experienced before. And I felt absolutely elated. So I was really on the line after that first performance as to whether I perform again. Because the level of vulnerability was frightening, was terrifying, as you can imagine. But the elation went out.
Yeah. What about when, did you invite your family to come see? What's that like?
I didn't at the beginning. I think it was 3 or 4 shows before I even allowed my husband to come.
Yeah.
I needed to kind of do it by myself and kind of create this new culture for myself before I felt comfortable. And it was hard for him at first. Those shows that I did without him, he was worried. He didn't really understand what burlesque was. He had never seen burlesque. He was not super comfortable with the idea of what I was doing. And then when he saw the first show, he was like, oh, this is what you're doing? This is amazing.
Yeah. So what was the difference, do you think, for him between burlesque and stripping? Because basically, yes, you're not showing, you, at least where we live, your nipples are covered. You don't see really any body parts. It's just sort of very scantily clad.
Yeah.
But it's still taking your clothes off in a sexy way and, enticing people and almost challenging them to look away. I mean, so what do you think shifted for him?
For him, it really was the audience. It was the fact that I wasn't performing to a bunch of men that were drunk, that he didn't have to worry for my safety necessarily. Not that that's not, that's a completely actually different issue about safety, but it didn't feel as unsafe as having a wife who was working in a strip club. Right? He went into this and there is, a room filled with mostly women. Like at that time, I think we had 85% of our audience was women, maybe even more. It's dropped down to about 65%. And people are it's a loving community who comes to these shows for the most part. And the thing that is different about burlesque than stripping, when I explain the differences, is we have different mandates. Within burlesque, your mandate, first and foremost, is to entertain. And then secondarily, people will get titillated, right? That certainly happens. Sexual arousal happens, titillation happens, but that's not the main focus of what you're doing. The main focus of what you're doing is to entertain. And within a regular strip club environment, your main focus is sexual titillation for the purpose of making money. Right? Of having that person buy lap dances or more alcohol, or wherever you happen to be in the world stripping, you have a different kind of underlying way of making money through sexual titillation. And so I think for my husband, the culture of people who come to a burlesque show where they're just so excited and they're women who are feeling empowered by watching performance. There's very few men who are often kind of in this space of, oh my God, I get to watch this kind of sacred thing that's happening to these women, and I'm just going to be quiet and sit quietly and be good, and nobody will kick me out.
Yeah. So true. I think that's a great point that I hadn't thought of before, that it's the audience that's the big difference. You know, of course, everything that you just said about mandate makes a lot of sense to me, but the feeling that I've had when I've seen strippers is completely different when I've seen burlesque performance. And I think being a part of a community and the sense of belonging and support, and I really feel like the audience is cheering for these women. You know, it's such a celebration. I really feel like I'm pulling for them to perform their best and really enjoy themselves. You know, it really is psychologically and emotionally just a completely different experience that I've really enjoyed. So you teach workshops to women, and one is called How to Love Your Jiggly Bits. And I'm curious about why that's so important to you. What made you decide to start teaching?
I teach workshops to women and men.
Oh.
Yeah, the men get the gentlemanly art of burlesque. And it's really important to me for all people, which is why I open it up to men as well, to come from a place of love with their bodies. I think we get really disassociated from our bodies. We sort of live in this weird headspace, or even just above our heads, just outside our bodies. And we often forget to connect with what's going on internally and physically. And we live in a culture that's so pervasive around body hate and body shame. Like so much so that I see people with I have people who come to my classes and workshops who have, stereotypically perfect bodies, like the common ideal of beauty, who are suffering greatly because they have an extra 2 pounds on them, or there's some part where they couldn't lose all that, that extra little bit of fat, and they are in like emotional pain. And, I feel like my first and foremost job, before we get into the burlesque, the first place that I come to, the first thing that I do with them is I help them release old ideas about what their body should look like or act like. Old feelings of shame that they're holding on to around their body. And I get them into a place where we start to view our bodies as a best friend, or as you would view a beloved child. We are alive, encased in these shells that are quite beautiful and quite amazing. If we take a few minutes to think about the reality of what we're cased in, we start to experience awe, as opposed to getting into that nitpicky thing of, well, this part isn't perfect and I don't like this part, and now my body's aging, or whatever, wherever we go to. So I try to bring them back to that place of awe. I kind of see it like, little kids like 2 or 3 years old, you see them in the summertime and they rip off all their clothes in the summer and they run around naked, and they just have this delight in the fact that they can move and they can stretch and they can, run and jump, and all of those things are so delighted. And I try to get people back into that space.
Yeah, and it sounds very healing.
It is.
How would you say that burlesque is a part of you fulfilling your greatest purpose or potential in your life?
It's stemmed out into so many different places in my life, in the sense that I think I have some important healing work to do in the world around sexuality, and some of the body stuff we talked about is part of that. I think that I really have some work to do in moving women forward in the world around what we can do with our bodies, around having agency with our bodies, around sexuality, around what we're able to say. And I'm doing that through the plays that I'm writing, my one-woman show.
I noticed too, I saw this on Facebook, actually. We're Facebook friends, and there was an incident with your daughter going to a school where the administration wanted to have a dress code because the clothing that some of the girls were wearing was distracting for the male staff, and you really took umbrage with that, as did I. And I found that the conversation on your thread was extremely nuanced, complex. There were many different sides that came out and sort of into this forum, and that seemed like an obvious next step too was about perhaps your work becoming, how would I put it, more mainstream, I guess. That you know, burlesque is part of a greater feminist movement, and that even for girls who are 14, we can't allow them to bear responsibility for how the opposite sex is responding to their sexuality.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that seemed like a really that seemed like a really important conversation that I really appreciated you sharing.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And actually, one of the people who was a huge advocate within that conversation for the young women, it has ended up being on the board of trustees for School District 61. She actually went in and investigated this further and has ran for, to be on the board and all this sort of stuff because of that conversation.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, a woman in leadership now. Well done, Rosie.
It was amazing. I was so excited and so inspired by what she was saying. And every time I couldn't deal with the comments, because some of the comments were pretty ugly.
Yeah.
She would jump in, or another person I knew would jump in, and they just have these beautiful and intelligent ways of dealing with the conversation, which was amazing.
That's so great. Now, I'm wondering what you would say to a woman like myself who has thought, I would really like to do that one day, but has never had the courage to move forward. What's your advice you'd give to somebody who is considering, burlesque or maybe some other art form that they've never done before?
Do it. Life is short. What I tell people in town is come to my class. It's a gentle and kind way of getting involved. We do a lot of work. We go through the gamut of really getting to a space of creating transformation around your feelings about your body, really connecting with your sexuality. And then after that, we start to do all the fun, learning the basics of burlesque and getting into fun, girly slumber party type of classes. It's just ridiculous and fun and amazing. And yeah, I encourage women and I encourage people to go and claim your passion because life is so short and so precious. There is no time to waste. So if this is what you want to do, or if you think you want to just explore this area, grab it.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, Rosie, the last question on the Numinous podcast comes from the Proust questionnaire. It's our traditional last question. What do you consider perfect happiness?
Perfect happiness. Having everyone in my family be healthy and well and content within their lives, and feeling, for me, creatively fulfilled. Being able to have the balance of everything that I do as a wife and a mother and a daughter, a mentor in my community and a creative person, having a balance of all of that settled beautifully. That would be perfect happiness.
It sounds beautiful, and I really appreciate your mentorship in our community, and I thank you for the encouragement you're offering women. Thanks for being on the show today, Rosie.
Thanks, Carmen.
What a dynamic woman, am I right? If you've never seen a burlesque performance, I hope this inspires you to do so because she's whip smart, isn't she? And I really appreciate having such a broad perspective on that style of artistic expression. I want to thank Rosie for being on the show, and thank you so much for listening. If you appreciated the show, I'd really love your review on iTunes. It's because it helps people find us when they're searching for like-minded and like-hearted people just like you. And you know what? You never know who needs to hear it right now, so please share this episode far and wide. I would also like to thank the listeners in Austria. I see you downloading every week, and I find this absolutely mind-boggling. Thank you so much for spending time with me. And if you'd like to keep exploring the great mystery of life with me, just go to my website, carmenspagnola.com, CarmenSpagnola. That's where you'll find the show notes for today's episode and the link to Rosie's website, which is bestbits.com, bestbitts.com. And if you'd like to keep exploring even beyond that, sign up for my monthly email newsletter. You'll instantly receive a free meditation download, and you'll get something free from me almost every month. Until next time, take care.